detail about that, know exactly what we'll be looking for, what to expect next week. All right, but let's go ahead and get started. Good afternoon. This is Ifan from the Strategic Day Trader, and this is your market wrap for July 19th, 2019. We have about 8 minutes left, and SPY is down 0.44. Qs are down 0.68, a little bit bigger here. I think the big thing that reported this earnings was the Microsoft. It did gap up initially and then get sold. So it did gap up to these all-time highs here on the Microsoft and then get sold, okay? So it's not so much the Qs necessarily down a lot, because by the time, you know, the Qs are down, I don't know, 2% in a day, or gapping down 2%, or sold off 2%, right? It's kind of too late, right? If we're talking about, you know, oh, the market's really weak, like on these days, really that's too late. What we're looking at here, right, is are we putting in a top? And I think what's interesting is this monthly here, right? That we tried to go higher, we did poke above, we did set up these all-time highs, and we're starting to reject those highs. Okay, so here it is on the SPY as well. Take a look at the weekly here. Okay, so you can see it got above just by a little bit and coming in. All right, so we are very close to failing on this daily pivot. Okay, all right, so we'll look at that also in the context of what we were looking for today. Okay, so we'll go back, and coming into today, we were neutral on the short term, right? And then still bullish on the long term. So there were kind of two things that I said would have to happen in order for me to pick a direction or to commit to a bias. And one was that we try to come in the morning and then we fail on that, and then I'll be bullish. Okay, but instead we gapped up, so that wasn't going to be a scenario. And then the other scenario, if that would make me bearish, is if we come to the lows and say we gap to the lows or we sell to the lows and then we kind of base there. Okay, so that seems to be the scenario that we're setting up, that we're selling back into this pivot, we're basing here, and then we can actually be bearish if it breaks down. Now, we don't really have the base going on, though. We don't really have the next setup. If we had sold off through it today, then on any kind of rally, we could be bearish. But right now, we've sold off into support, right? So I think it's not so clear, right, that the top is in. But I think if we do base here or we continue the sell-off and then we can look for the next setup, then it's looking more and more like, right, we're gonna put the top in, right? So now if the top is in, right, that doesn't necessarily mean we're gonna come crashing in. That doesn't necessarily mean that it has to fall apart, right? It just means that we're gonna probably get choppy, sloppy downward price. Okay, that we're gonna be breaking this uptrend that we have in place, and so that could mean also a lot of sideways and slightly to down price action, right? So just because the top is in doesn't necessarily mean that the price is gonna fall apart or the market itself is gonna fall apart. But I don't think we can understate kind of the bearishness of this gap up and it getting sold. Okay, so that's why if we break this, we'll actually lose the long-term bias here, because the daily will now have been broken, right? And we'll actually get this engulfing bar, engulfing price on the weekly. So I do think that the larger time frames, which we've been bullish on, basically for the last 4 months, yeah, we did the recovery. We looked like we may try to attempt to go back lower. That failed. That put us bullish, and then we pretty much remained bullish on the larger time frames ever since. This was kind of the point in time for if there was going to be a bearish reaction for it to come in. And here, I'm sure a lot of bears did get trapped here, and then since then, we were able to make new highs, right? So, very, very interesting. I think the most bullish thing that could happen is that we get some positive earnings and we just outright get over this 307, okay, on the SPY, and for this 193.83. If we get back over today's high, right, back to all out bullish, right, because this will have shown how much selling there really is in the market, and if we recover from that, very, very bullish. Okay, because this I'm going to be interpreting as a pretty bearish event, right? We had this gap up and got sold. Microsoft went to all-time highs and got sold, right? That's what we call gap disease when that happens. Okay, so a pretty interesting day, pretty important day, I think, that really we have to take note of. Okay, so I hope it's clear going into Monday. All right, if we kind of go sideways, if we set up, rest a bit and then break down, we can be bearish from there. If the sell-off continues, then the next sell setup or the next breakdown also can initiate a bearish bias. Okay, so just be on the lookout. We are ready to start looking for bearish setups in the market now. This sell-off here, rejection here. And so, you know, looking at this too, coming into today, we were neutral because we'd rallied back into an area of resistance. So while this recovery looked bullish, I did not like the location. And so we gapped up deeper into resistance and then got sold. So I think that coming into today, neutral, right, I think was the right place to be. Yes, you could have been bearish and then bearish on the gap up, and then that would have been the most kind of correct approach. But I think based on what we had, based on reading the chart, I think we knew not to be overly bullish. Could have been more bearish, but I did not see this gap up as necessarily getting sold. So, but now with this information going into Monday, we'll be looking for the next bearish setup, see what the market wants to do. I wouldn't be surprised if we get some kind of narrower range on Monday, just because today is one of the larger range days that we've had in some time. So I wouldn't be surprised if we get some kind of neutral resting day. But yeah, pretty interesting bar that we got today in the market. All right, let's continue our discussion from yesterday, because we did have a weak market right from the open. And so what was I looking for? As we talked about yesterday, we talked about the AMAT, how the market was weak in the morning. We played the AMAT here before we got to lunch there. We played it as a 5-minute breakout yesterday, if you recall, here, basing at the highs and then giving us that nice breakout while the market was downtrending all morning. Okay, so as the market got sold this morning, looked for something similar. Okay, so here it is. The ETFC is what I went after. Okay, as it was breaking out this morning, the ETFC. Okay, that was the first play today. We went after this ETFC for a breakout. Ended up not going as far as we would have liked. This was holding up as the market, and eventually did fail there. So the STT, you know, very similar to the AMAT. I like this play. I like the gap. It was beyond the 200 here. You can see kind of curling, moving up. I thought it looked pretty decent. Just didn't want to pan out there. STT ended up being the one to go after. So again, market being sold. This was holding up very well. I was on the mic as this came up. Sammy, it was really Sammy's play. I got in a little bit late on that green bar as it broke above the topping tails. Really triggered right in there. You can see that pullback there, right to the rising 20 there. Also a nice gap here, been weak, gapping over this resistance. Pretty nice there. And transitioning back up higher. So this ended up being the one. Again, that relative strength there, very, very impressive on the part of the STT. And you can see even as we looked at the Qs here and the SPY, probably SPY, maybe a little bit more relevant, being that, you know, STT is a bank, right? Closing here at the lows, and look at that STT, right? Continue the uptrend. So, you know, this is what we're looking for. I'm sure there are a lot of things that also got sold or came in, right? But very nice relative strength, right, on the STT. So, you know, like I mentioned yesterday, it's not that everything will necessarily hold up. But in general, this is what I'm looking for. And so, you know, this play, while it didn't work out, I like this setup. You know, I would do it again. I think it's a good setup. STT ended up being the one that worked and the one that kind of went all day. So really nice follow through on the STT. So, you know, I don't expect them to all work out, you know, but we are looking for these. These are the outliers. These are the ones that give you a nice move, right? So that there's a lot of target and reward the risk to take advantage of there, right? And so, I got a question yesterday when I was playing the AMAT, actually. Yeah, so when we were playing the AMAT, right, I got this question here that, well, the AMAT has already moved $1.60. Yeah, so from 46.50 to 47, 90. It's already moved $1.60, right? Do you really expect it to move that much more? And my response was that I do, because on this day it should put in something. It's telling me that a lot of people are paying attention to it. It's doing above average volume. I think at the time it was only halfway through the day and this already had done its average volume. That's something special is going on here, right? So when we look at the S&P and you look at the size of that bar, right, the average range is expected to be exceeded because something eventful is happening. In this case, it also reported earnings, right? And so a lot of people are watching it and continuing to keep this moving. Okay, so that is looking for relative strength. I wouldn't want to mislead you into thinking, every time you find a high of the day base that it's going to follow through when the market is weak, right? But something like this ETFC doesn't pan out, right? And then this STT can make up for it 2-3 times. I think in this case 4 times over, right? I think this went out more than 4 Rs here on the STT pullback, probably even more than that. This is what we're looking for, kind of the big moves here. All right. So I just wanted to continue that discussion of relative strength because whenever it's still, we go over something, it becomes relevant. And when we see it again the next day, that's what we need to be doing, right? Is keeping our eyes open, right? And constantly making improvements and aware of what's going on here, okay? But I think probably the big topic of discussion, the big thing that we'll be watching for next week is how does the market respond to this rejection, okay? So it tried to gap up and right to the highs and got soundly sold. So we'll see if it recovers from this. Very, very bullish, okay? Especially, I can't imagine it gapping up over it. Probably would need some pretty big news of it, but if that happens, then we are definitely in for some higher prices. But for now, without any kind of abnormal or very unexpected thing happening, just based on what we have here, the market is starting to weaken, is starting to break the uptrend, okay? So we can look for the next entry. If we base out here, that's good enough. If we break, then we'll look for the next one, okay? All right, so we'll have plenty to talk about next week, and we'll be ready to see what goes on in the market on Monday. All right, so hope you have a good weekend, and then we'll be back at it on Monday, right into the thick of earnings. All right, so I hope you're excited. I will talk to you on Monday. Have a good weekend, everyone.